Good morning. Thank you for joining me. Today, we are going to talk about the top 5 habits of original thinkers. We've done a lot of political stuff here lately, a lot of history lessons, and I want to get back to some more of what makes us a community. And that's more just the random stuff that I teach and that I talk and that I learn and that I live. So, habits of original thinkers. I got to thinking over the last couple of weeks. I've been reading a couple of books on philosophy, on negotiation, different things like that. And a lot of it is getting into people's heads and trying to realize what they think and how they think and be able to use that to our advantage or help them out or whatever it is. But realizing that I think outside the norm, and I think a lot of high performers really do. So this is going to be my top 5 things, and I'm sure there's more. So put them in the comments that I do that think outside the box. And I'm going to explain to you what that means because on the surface they sound kind of counterintuitive as to what that means and how that works. So the 5 things that we're going to talk about are going to be how to use procrastination as a tool, how to embrace failure and use that to catapult yourself to success, how you can take diverse and multidisciplinary learning. Oh my God, those sound so official, but they're buzzwords and they're SEO and they're ways to catch people's attention, especially the algorithm, because we all know the algorithm likes words that we don't use in regular conversation. What does that mean? Multidisciplinary learning. Well, that just means that you can study and learn about whatever you want, and you can apply things, knowledge from one specific industry to another that may not necessarily look like it applies on the surface. So, questioning the status quo, that's one of my favorites. We're going to talk about that at length in a few minutes. And then practical applications, which is just basically if it works, then it's a good idea. If it doesn't, then it's not. Hillbilly engineering, whatever you want to talk about. I'm going to use my golf cart as an example on that, for lack of a better term. So let's dig right into it. I pause because this topic really encompasses who I am. I've never been one to walk the line. I've always been somebody that believes in systems, and I do believe that if you're going to alter a system, you have to understand that system. So one of the things that, and then before we get into this, I want to share this with you. This is an anecdote from back in the retail days. I was a retail sales rep for Montgomery Ward, of all places. That place is long gone, I believe now. But one of the things that we had to do as a retail sales rep that had nothing to do with our job was inventory. And anybody that has any kind of a store business or anything that deals with products, you have to do inventory. Inventory always seemed inevitably to be messed up. It was wrong. It was incorrect. There were counts were off. We had spent the inventory itself didn't appear to take very long. It was the reconciliation and the cycles and all of the different things we had to do to try and figure out what went wrong. I hated that. It ended up costing us hours and hours late into the night. We were tired the next day. And more importantly, we were commissioned sales reps. We weren't making any money for it. So I want you to think about a task that you've had to do in the past that you just absolutely hated, whether it didn't make sense, you didn't like doing it. Just think about that for a second and feel what that feels. Close your eyes. I need you in that emotional state so you can truly understand what I'm about to talk about. Now that you're there, what if you could take that and become so good at it that it was no longer an emotional trigger for you? This is what I did with inventory. I did this at a very young age. I was in my late teens, early 20s. I decided early on that I would become an expert at inventory, not because I gave a rip about inventory one way or the other. I become an expert at inventory because I didn't want to do it. And it seemed to me logically, since this task was something that I had to do as part of my job, that if I could do it in the minimum amount of possible, the minimum amount of time as possible, then I could spend more time doing what was important to me long term, which was making money or taking my free time or whatever. So I became a student of how they perform their inventory, of how inventory got done. Got better at it than anybody else, better at it than management, even to the point where would start anticipating inventory even when it wasn't on the radar, making sure that exceptions were checked and triggered correctly. Was it perfect? No. But during this time, the stores where I had was in that department, not even in control of the inventory, but was in that department. The shrink went down because it was tracked better, not because I can say that theft was better or not, but also the time to do inventory was cut by over a third and sometimes two-thirds because it was prepped, it was ready, and it was kept constantly at the ready. All because I didn't want to stay at home. So this is one example of original thinking. It seems counterintuitive to become very, very good at the things that you don't like to do or that you hate to do. However, that's sometimes the only way to defend yourself against them. So that's with that frame of thought and with that emotional trigger going through this, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Um, let's talk about the first one, procrastination as a tool. I am the world's worst for procrastinating about things that I need to do. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes I'm busy, sometimes I just don't want to flip and do it. The podcast is a good example. Since I've taken over, I don't always hit that 5 o'clock in the morning deadline. Now I can use that as a reason to say, oh, well, things are tiring and it's busy, and my podcast studio sits in my living room, so I have to record when it's quiet. Well, you know what? And I typically record these around 3 and 4 a.m. so that it's quiet and so that I can do what I need to do without interruption. Well, it turns out that there are more 3 or 4 a.m.s throughout the week than just on Thursday mornings. But procrastination, kick it off. I'll do it Thursday morning, and it's dangerously close to becoming a habit, one that I absolutely need to break. How do you break habit using that? I'm just going to use this as an example. Well, I've recorded 2 or 3 extra episodes, which I've refused to use so far because they're getting me ahead of time. I'm continuing this particular habit for the next week, probably not into next week because I've got a lot of ideas that I'm going to get down and get recorded so that I'm always a week ahead. And at that point, then it doesn't really matter. If you have something in the tank to move forward, then you can procrastinate. You can do things on your own time. And I really hate being restricted. I think I'm going to do another talk on that for Thanksgiving about discipline and living a life of discipline as opposed to applying discipline to things. So, how do you use procrastination as a tool? Because everything I just described to you doesn't sound like it's a tool. Well, here is how you use procrastination as a tool. You can use that as a way to enhance your creativity or as a way to make good decisions, but it has to be leveraged procrastination, which can be called delay. Um, you've heard me say repeatedly that I never have made a good decision when I was angry, when I was scared, or when I was excited. This is exactly one way to leverage procrastination. Whenever you have something that you need to decide big, get everything done, get your decision made, figure out what you're going to do, and then sit on it, sleep on it is a good idea. Let your subconscious chew on it. And a lot of my coaching students hear me say that your subconscious will chew on it. Let it go for a day or so, maybe 12 hours if at all possible. Let it go for a few minutes if you don't have a lot of time, but give your subconscious time to process it. That's procrastination in a way, but it's a way to leverage that procrastination. And sometimes you'll see things that you don't expect. One of the things that you run into whenever you do this is um, you see errors or the logic fallacy now that the decision is made and the pressure is off starts to bubble up. I like to use this as the trigger phrase. So remember this. If it's a good idea today, it'll still be a good idea tomorrow. If you're trying to close a sale, maybe that's not the best thing to do. If you're buying something, yes, it's the best thing to do. If you're trying to close a sale, it's important to get those signatures and get that done. You don't want to put off a sale and lose some business because somebody needs to think about it overnight. That's not what I'm talking about. Two totally different tactics. What I am talking about is making major decisions or even writing or publishing. Let's say you've written a paper, an essay, something for school, something you're going to be putting out there, a PowerPoint presentation for work, or Canva presentation, whatever they're called these days. I haven't used PowerPoint forever, use Canva now. But let them sit. You'll see spelling errors, you'll see continuity errors, you'll see all kinds of stuff once your subconscious has had time to chew on that. A lot of successful individuals will use this. And it doesn't mean sitting down and thinking about it. It means taking all the decisions, making them all, putting everything down, and then thinking about something else for a while, and then coming back to it. That's the way you can use procrastination as a tool. There's a ton of other ways to do that, but that's the most pointed example that you've got. Second thing, embracing failure. We are taught in school that failure is bad. Did you bring home A's or B's? Well, I brought home C's or D's. Did you pass the project? Did you win? If you're in sports, did you whatever? We are taught that mistakes are bad and that mistakes are failure. And because we've conflated mistakes with failure, we've created this whole dichotomy in an entire generation that doesn't understand the difference between making mistakes to learn and what failure truly is. So I'm going to encourage all of you, especially you younger people that are listening to me right now, is understand the difference between mistakes and failure. Mistakes are simply errors that you've made. That's it. They don't have to be permanent, and they're expected because you're not automatically good at everything that you do. If you can remember learning to roller skate, or learning to ride a bicycle, or learning that new video game, or whatever it is, you suck at it at first. That's the nature of life. Failure is not mistakes, and mistakes are okay, and mistakes are encouraged. One of the ways that I use failure is I tell people, I say, fail faster. Get out there and fuck some shit up. Go make some mistakes because this is how you learn. Failure is when you quit. Failure is when you stop. Now, if you're trying to do something and you're not mentally or physically able to do that, admitting that, moving on, and changing directions, that's still a choice. Failure is when you have the capability of doing something, you have the ability of doing something, and you simply choose not to because it's too hard, or because you don't want to, or because you're giving up. That's failure. Don't let failure dictate your life. Now, sometimes, as an example previously, you have to make a choice and you have to move on. Um, that's learning. That's allowing your mistakes to teach you what you need to know. And that's allowing yourself to make a good choice and admit to yourself what you really know or what you really want to know. Whenever I'm encouraging people and we're talking about setting goals, I always tell people, I said that long-term goal may change, but what your daily actions are does not. Because sometimes you have to admit to yourself your life circumstances change, what you want changes, what you're doing changes. That's okay. That is not failure. You are simply shifting your efforts into a different direction and into a different direction with experience. And if you lose everything and you have to start over, you're not really starting over. You have failed in the traditional term, but you stand up, you have all that knowledge and experience, and you can build back again much faster and a much stronger organization than you had in the first place. So remember the difference between mistakes and failure. Embrace your failures so that you can use those as tools to move forward. I had to get good at this, folks. My intellectual way of learning things seems to be to do everything in the most difficult way possible and the wrong way possible until I've eliminated all of those, and the only thing left is to do it the right way. I had to get good at this. There was no other option for me. So this is one of my favorites. The next topic is diverse interest and multidisciplinary learning. What does this mean? It means if you're interested in it, study it. Oh my God, study. I haven't cracked a book since high school. As a matter of fact, I brag about the fact I didn't read an entire book in high school. If you're that guy, go read a book. Good God. Don't let your knowledge fade. The only superpower that we have is the ability to impart and to receive knowledge from other people without their presence across time. Read books, study. I don't care if you want to or not. It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what you study. You can read fiction books. You can read nonfiction books. You're going to learn from all of them. Find something you like and study it. Then find something you don't like and study that too. Because what happens is that you can study psychology and you can study math and you can study history and you can read these fiction books. And if you have my reading list, then you know that I've got a mix of all of these different things because I believe that multidisciplinary learning, that learning across different arts and different disciplines and different topics and different subject matters makes you, one, a more interesting person because you can truly talk about anything. But number two, it allows you to pull connections between two that nobody else has ever thought of and allows you to be successful and to solve problems in creative ways. Um, One of the books that I learned this from, and there's a good example of it in there, there's a book called Friday by Robert Heinlein. It was published back, I think, in the 50s or 60s. One of my favorite books by Heinlein. And if you followed my podcast, you know that I love Heinlein. So there's a lot of favorite books by Heinlein. But Friday talks about this multidisciplinary learning. The boss of the organization that she works for, actually has her sit down and study whatever the hell she feels like for months at a time. And this is before the internet, but she was using a tool similar to the internet, access to all the world's libraries. And he would wake her up or interrupt her at random times and just ask her random questions that seemed to have nothing to do with anything. But what she was doing is she was ingesting all of this massive amount of information and using her subconscious to process it and produce unique creative answers that oftentimes were right. So don't shirk on learning things. Take 5 or 10 minutes a day, read something, pick up that news article, read about a house, read about architecture, read, if you're a doctor, go read about being an engineer, go watch a plumbing video on how to plumb a house or something. It doesn't matter. Just remember, study outside of your norm. This is not hard, folks. Gives your brain a break, and often you'll find yourself, even though you've been studying and learning things that are different, you'll find yourself more relaxed because your brain was able to think about something else than what your norm is. So I cannot stress multidisciplinary learning enough, and it doesn't matter what it is. Just go do something different, and don't just make it a television. Sitting in front of the television watching another TV series only works, and I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but it only works if that's not all that you do. If that's all that you do, then you're not really processing anything. You're just feeding information directly into your subconscious and not using it. Remember that. So the next step is questioning the status quo. I'm going to quote Neil Patrick Harris from Dr. Horrible's Sing Along blog. If you haven't seen that, it's hard to find, but it's hilarious. The status is not quo. Some things exist simply because they're there, not because they are the best solution, not because they should exist. Elon Musk talks about this in a podcast, and I'm going to bastardize this, and I don't mean to, but it's just paraphrasing his quote, where he talks about the problem with engineers is they solve problems that shouldn't exist in the first place, things that should just be eliminated that don't really need to be there. We get so dedicated into doing what we've always done or what the status quo is that we don't take time to step back and look at it and go, well, what the hell is this existing in the first place? So I'm going to give you some steps to take a look and to critically examine things that exist and don't exist or that shouldn't exist in the world. And I don't know what exists in your world. I don't have a clue. I'd love for you to share with me some of these stories, because this stuff gets me excited. I really enjoy people that start operating and thinking outside the box. So I'll share mine, and my biggest one. You've heard it before. This is nothing new, but maybe from a different perspective and maybe an insight into how I look at things and how I look at the world. And this is an example of a breakthrough. You don't have to believe the lie that you've been told your entire life, that you have to work for 40 years for somebody else at a job you hate, doing things you don't like, to impress people you don't care about, so that you can have 10 or 11 years to do whatever you want. That is a lie. It is a straightforward lie. You can create the life that you want to create, and I'm going to encourage you to do it right now. That is throwing in the face of status quo. Will yours be that big? I don't know. Mine was. My realization happened years ago, 20, 25 years ago. It wasn't even a realization. I've had jobs in the past that I really enjoyed, but I didn't enjoy them because of the job. I enjoyed them because of what I was doing, because of the choices that I made. And I've gone into at length in my books and in some of my training programs, we're talking about how to take, if you're stuck in a dead end job or you're stuck in doing something you hate, how to take control of your life in microscopic ways that nobody else knows but you, but to start reshaping your mental landscape to fit what you actually believe. So that's huge for me. But taking control of things that you believe are yours, you believe are not the norm, or you believe are incorrect in the world and in today's society, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. Look at the things in your life that you don't like to do. Look at the things in your life that are keeping where you're at. And this is an insanely difficult prospect. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is this, and here's a tool in how to do that, is sit down I prefer the morning. You can do it in the evening. Whenever your brain is just, whenever you find your mind wandering, and you're allowing yourself to truly think about things. Imagine if your life was somebody else's. Imagine if your life was being lived as you observing it from above and beside and in every aspect. What are the absurd things that you see that person doing that you, as an outside observer, could just reach into that life and tweak? If this person would just do X, they'd be a lot happier. And this could be, okay, maybe you need a different job. Maybe you need to be more committed to your job and grow and overcome that fear of promoting or going up further. I don't have anything against jobs. They weren't for me, but a lot of people have made successful careers. I got a lot of people that work for me that don't want to do what I do, but they're very good at what they do. There's nothing wrong with having a job. And especially if you enjoy it and you like what you're doing and you're just afraid to take that next step up the ladder, well, go ahead and do it. Reach out and do it. Maybe that's the tweak. Maybe they're observing and they're looking at the way that this person's interacting with their family, and they see that their children are just begging them for attention, and they're sitting there on their phone, or they're sitting there watching TV, or 1,000 other things that appear more important at the instant. And if you could just reach in to that person's head and turn their head and focus at those little lives that just want that attention desperately and need that attention desperately in that interaction, and tweak that one thing. Those are not huge changes from an implementation standpoint, but they are massive changes from a emotional standpoint and from a life standpoint. So sit back and give yourself permission to truly observe your life. You're going to like a lot of what you see. And I'm going to encourage you, that stuff that you don't like, I'll focus on that just as much as the stuff that you do like. Don't beat yourself up too much. You've built a life, and we all do this to a certain degree in our own image in our head of what our life should be. But sometimes life throws circumstances at us and we have to react accordingly. Sometimes those reactions become habits and they don't need to be there anymore. The circumstances that dictated their implementation no longer exist. So remember that as you're moving forward. You are not looking for things you're doing wrong. You're looking for things that just simply shouldn't be there, or things that need to be done differently. Because again, go back up a couple of steps. Mistakes are not failure. And even if you've taken a long time making mistakes, that's okay too. Because you don't have to keep making it just because you got a lot of time invested in it. It's okay to stop, walk away, and go do something different. So these are some practical applications of my top 5 ways to think outside the box, or unconventional habits. I want to hear what yours are, your unconventional ways of thinking, ways of originality. Let me know. Send me a DM. Thank you guys. I appreciate all of your time. You like, subscribe, follow us, share with your friends. We got some exciting stuff coming up. You're going to be seeing my new book coming out, which is Beyond the Handshake. That I've been teasing that a little bit. We're going to get that launched out of here next week. Get some Black Friday sales going on for that, and a couple other things. So if you want to continue to engage and you want to continue to grow, then make sure that you're interacting with me on all different social medias. Send us a message. Let us know what it is that you want to do and you want to see going forward. And I want to hear what your thoughts on today's episode are. Love y'all. Peace.